Okay, so today we're going to talk about integers and absolute value. We're having some definitions. Again, I'm going to show you kind of how to do those 4 IXL lessons, and we'll go from there. Okay, so first I'll start with some definitions. First of all, what is an integer? Let's write this down, please. All right, an integer are all positive and negative whole numbers, including 0. Write that down, please. Okay, positive and negative whole numbers and 0. 0 is included, right? So the good thing about integers is it's whole numbers. So we're not dealing with decimals, we're not dealing with fractions at all. The bad news is we're dealing with negative numbers, and negative numbers make things a lot trickier, and we'll talk about those. Okay, so positive and negative whole numbers. So let's write down some examples. Okay, I want to write down some examples and some non-examples also. Okay, so let's start with some examples. The example is the number 1. That is an integer. All right. The number -17. That is an integer. Put in the chat. What are some other integers? Just go ahead. Anything. What are some other examples of what would be integers? 5. Yep, that's a good one. -1. Sure. -9. Someone put in the chat numbers 1 through 11. Yes. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to think how many zeros. Someone put a really, really large number that's billions, trillions, quadrillions, something like that. Yes, all of those. Okay, so negative a million. We'll just stop it there. Okay, or 1,000. Just so I don't have to write so many. Okay, so they go on and on and on forever. Okay, and then yeah, 0 is also an integer. It's a good one. Okay, okay. So those are all integers. Yes. Okay. There's an infinite amount. Correct. Okay. Now let's also. All right. Let's also let's do some non-examples. What are some examples that are not integers? So for example, 1/2 is not an integer. 9.5, that's a good one. 9.5, not an integer. 1/2, good. 0.1, good, not an integer. Let's put one of these negative. -9/10, not integers, right? Anything with fractions, anything with decimals, not integers, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, -6.5, that's a good one too. All right, so those are non-examples. So we're lucky. Again, we don't have to worry about fractions or decimals. We do have to worry about positive and negative. All right, now what are some words that make sure that we're going to use negative numbers? Words or phrases. So certain one thing you have to be able to do is be able to look at a scenario. They give you a scenario on your homework or something, and it says, "Is this a positive number or a negative number?" Well, if we know our vocabulary and we understand how that works, we'll be able to do this. So, for example, the word below, right? Below sea level, below normal, something like that. That is a negative word. That means the number is going to be negative. Um, what are some other examples that you guys can think of words that would be negative?
Under.
Under. Yeah, under. That's a good one. What else? You can either say it out loud or put in the chat. Less? Yeah, good. Sure, less is good. Subtract? Sure. Okay. Yeah, take away, subtracting. Okay, those are negative words. What else? What about in terms of money? What if you owe money? What's that called? Anyone know what that's called? You owe, yeah. So owing, but there's another word. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Debt, right? If you're in debt. Yeah, a loan. So if you owe money or a loan, you're at a debt is the word we're looking for. How about if you take money out? Like let's say you go from the bank and you take money out of your account, so you have less money. Okay, thank you. Someone put that one there. Tracy, good job. Okay, withdraw. Okay, Other words like decrease. Okay, all these words that are like negative, right? You hear them and you're like, okay, we're going backwards, right? The number is going to get lower, things like that. Okay, so those are negative words, and there's more. These are not. This is not a complete list. What about some on the opposite side? What are some positive words? Over, good. Kind of just the opposite of these other ones, right? More, yeah, instead of less, there's more, good. Instead of subtract, you're going to add. What's the opposite of withdraw? You guys know that one? Instead of taking money out, you're going to put money in. What's that called? You don't know that one? Increase, that's a good one. Deposit, yes, good job. Okay. Above, right? If it said below, above, okay. Gain instead of loss, right? Profit, extra, surplus. There's a lot of different words for positive numbers too. Right. So, and there are other words that I didn't list here. Okay. It's just good to identify because you're going to see a problem that looks like this. So this is the kind of problem you're going to see from that first IXL lesson here. It'd be something like this. It would say the temperature is 5 degrees below normal. So what number represents this situation? Right? Positive 5 or negative 5, right? So it's below, so it's going to be negative 5. And that's it, right? There's a whole IXL lesson where this is all you have to do. Choose the positive number or the negative number based off of what it's describing, okay? So that's one example. I'm not going to do a whole lot of examples for this, but that's one thing you're going to have to be able to do. Is it should be a positive or should be a negative, okay? All right. The next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to graph. All right. So the kind of problem you're going to have is going to say graph. All right. Now I'm going to, on your keyboard, next to the letter P, you're going to see to the right, there's like these fancy looking brackets. Okay. There's like the squarish ones and there's ones a little curvy. Those curvy ones we're going to draw. Those are actually important in math. It's called set notation. Basically, if you want to know a set of numbers, you put it not in parentheses, you put it in those kind of fancy brackets. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to make those fancy brackets like this. You make like a skinny S, and then a skinny opposite S. And you made a fancy bracket. Here are my numbers, -3, -1, or sorry, +1, and 5. Then to do the other side, yeah, you go the other way, right? You go backwards to a forward S. Yeah, so these are the brackets that we're talking about. If you look into the chat, okay, those type of brackets, right? Okay, so the fancy brackets, that just means the set of numbers. So this is what we're gonna do. This is how we graph these, okay? You're gonna draw a number line. Everyone draw a number line. You put arrows at the end to show that the numbers go on forever in both directions, all the way to higher numbers, all the way to lower numbers. Let's start with let's make this an easy one. Let's put 0 here, and we'll go up to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. All right, I'll give you a second to draw that. All right, so in order to graph these numbers, all you're going to do is you're going to put a dot where the number is on the number line. So I'm going to find, first one I'm going to find is -3. So I'm going to find -3. Over here it is, right here, -3. And I'm going to put a dot on the number line at -3. And that is how you graph. So go ahead and do the same with the other numbers. It's pretty simple, but sometimes people make mistakes because they accidentally like, oh, it's a 5, they put a -5 or something like that. It's really easy to accidentally drop out your negatives. So that's one thing you got to be really, really careful about, is not losing your negatives. So 1 is right there, and 5 is up here. Right? Graphing pretty straightforward. Right? Again, there is an IXL lesson just on this. Okay, so you should be able to get to 80 or higher. I believe that you guys can do that, right, within a couple of minutes. Okay, let's move on. We've got 2 more parts here. Let's talk about absolute value. All right, absolute value. Oh, sorry, I don't want that yet. I don't see. Sorry. Absolute value is defined as the distance from 0. The distance a number is from 0. And one thing that you'll know about distance is always positive. What do you mean distance is always positive, Mr. Leong? Well, let's think of it this way. If you take a step backwards, okay, or let's start. If you take a step forward, you're 1 step away from where you started. If you take a step backwards, you're still 1 full step away, right? You're not -1 steps. Maybe here's a good example for you guys. Let's say your mom decided to drive around the block backwards in reverse. Does that mean that it subtracts the amount of miles that she drove? No. Does she get the fuel back? Right? It's like, oh, I need gas. I better drive backward. Like, no, right? When you drive, whether you're driving forward or backwards, that's how much it's a distance. If you drive for 1 mile forward or backwards, the distance you traveled is 1 mile, right? Let's say for you guys, if you were to run backwards for 500 feet, you're still going to be tired because you ran a distance of 500 feet, right? So distance is always positive. So what does this mean for these types of problems here? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's say we had the number -5. And this is the absolute value symbol. The absolute value symbol is these 2 bars around the number. Okay, it's not parentheses, they're not curved, they're straight, and they're a little bit bigger. All right. So the question is, how far is -5 from 0? Right? If I was at -5, if I was here, how far would I be from 0? Well, I'd be 5 steps away, right? 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 steps, 5 steps. So I am at 5. Does that make sense? Right? The absolute value -5, the distance that -5 is from 0 is 5. Well, what about a positive number? Like 7. Would that become a -7? No, it's just 7, right? Because 7 is still also 7 from distance from 7. Does that make sense? Some people think that absolute value is like a magic machine, like it turns negative to positive and positive to negative. It doesn't work like that. Instead, it changes negative to positive, and positive stays as positive. Pretty easy, right? Now, let me give you one that's a little bit tricky. What about something like this? Would this be positive 10 or negative 10? What do you guys think? Positive or negative? It's definitely 10, something 10. Okay, this one's tricky. The correct answer is negative 10. Whoa, 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 Mr. Leong, didn't you just say it's always positive? I did. Notice, where is the negative sign? Is it inside or is it outside the absolute value? Okay. You guys see that it's on the outside? Yeah, it's on the outside. So everything in the absolute value turns positive, but the negative's on the outside. So it's kind of like this. Let's say you were, let's say, you know, something happened inside your house. Someone was making spaghetti and the pasta sauce exploded. Okay. If you're in the house, it gets on you. If you're out of the house, it doesn't affect you at all, right? Right? Nothing gets on you. You're outside the house. Okay. So the negative, if it's on the outside of the house, it doesn't get affected by the absolute value. It doesn't turn it positive. So this right here, if you notice, is on the outside. Okay. So that's one thing. Versus this one, you can see that the negative's on the inside. A little bit tricky. Okay. One other thing you might have to do with this one is something like this. Can you tell me what the absolute of negative 5 minus the absolute value of negative 2? What do you get when you do this problem? Thank you, Hira. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Tracy. Very good. Yep, you guys got it, right? This is going to be positive 5 minus positive 2, which is positive 3. Yep, right? Pretty simple. Good. Okay, good. All right, the last thing. So that's absolute value. That one's a little bit tricky. We can go over that a little bit more tomorrow as well. All right, last thing, comparing numbers. Using greater than, less than, or equal to. All right, so the trickiest part is negative numbers here. So let's do like a negative number one here. Let's say which is greater than or less than or equal to, which is greater than negative 70 or negative, we'll make it real easy here, negative 60. Which is greater? Thank you, Hira. Thanks, Samantha. So this is what people get tricked up about, okay? Some people say, well, 70 is bigger, Mr. Leong, right? Let's think of it in terms of the number line. If I was to draw a number line, here's negative 70. Here's negative 60. Remember, this works like this. The bigger numbers are to the right. The smaller numbers are to the left, right? Depends on what's closer to 100 or closer to 0. Yeah, in positive, it's easy to see. But think of it this way. The way I like to think of it too is, would I rather owe $60 or would I rather owe $70? Right? I don't want to owe money to anyone, but if I had to owe anyone, I'd rather owe 60. Yeah. So it should be like this. So negatives make things a little bit tricky. You got to just make sure that you know that, hey, a smaller negative is actually bigger, and a bigger negative is actually smaller, right? So I'd rather have $1 than negative $10, right? Because negative 10 means I owe somebody money, and I don't want that. Okay, so let's review a little bit here. These are the 4 different things you're going to have to be able to do. First thing is, can you tell, like on number letter A here, can you tell me if the answer should be positive or negative, right? Should it be a positive 5 or negative 5? Letter B here, can you graph numbers on a number line? That's another IXL lesson there. So those are 2 IXL lessons. Absolute value, can you tell me what an absolute value is? Okay, and then can you compare some numbers? Those are the 4 lessons that I'm going to have you guys do on IXL. And again, we're going to have time tomorrow to do it as well.